shows.
Going nowhere, going
Love this song, though.
The tears are
All right. Welcome to the Zenspath Entertainment Network podcast extra quarter, episode 31, all about Gears of War. I'm your host, Jeremy Powers, and joining me are the two other Gears fans of mine. We have the lighter Gears fan and Steven.
Chickstig the Baird.
And my fellow brother in chainsaws, Chase.
Rock on.
Oh, man. So recently, over the past couple of months, in one form or another, the three of us have played through every single mainline and some subline Gears of War games in co-op. So we've kind of rebranched through the entire thing, and we wanted to talk about some of the series, some of the things we loved, hated, wanted changed, whatever. Our experiences in the multiplayer, and Steven's frustration how so many of them don't have more than two players, so he couldn't join us. So, yeah. So I think first off, we should jump into, I guess, some of the earlier memories of the series. So Gears of War, of course, is an Epic Games franchise originally. It's now been purchased and owned by Microsoft in whole, so all the new titles from that are from it. But originally, it was shown off as a tech demo for Unreal Engine 3 all the way back in 2004 before anyone knew what Gears of War was. So I'll try and get some of these in the notes for the show, so you can go down and click on these to see them. But obviously, if you watch these demos, you're seeing a lot of stuff from Gears of War that people didn't know about at the time. You're seeing locusts and different environments and things like that. But it was like 2005 is when most people heard about it. But that's what I wanted to cover first. And Chase, we'll start with you. But where did you first discover Gears of War?
First discovered Gears it's actually a cover story in Game Informer, RIP.
Yeah.
Game Informer magazines. Man, it was really good cover story, and I was reading through it, and then as I started to get on YouTube, watch trailers, start to really get into the game. Gears of War was one of the main reasons why I wanted to get a 360, because I'd always had a PlayStation up until that point. And I really wanted to get a 360 because of Gears of War and a game called Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. Those were the two that really wanted to, because I really liked third person shooters, which we have Rogue Trooper to thank for that. So yeah, that was, but just reading that cover story and just seeing how great the game looked at the time. And I think the Xbox 360 version still holds up in a way. And then, yeah, and just reading through the story, the cover story, and seeing all the different stuff that they were talking about, I was like, man, this game is going to be awesome.
Steven, what about you? Do you remember where you first heard about Gears of War?
I think mainly because I was always a proponent of watching or being at most E3s that I could afford to or otherwise get into. I think this one, though, I just saw more on TV when they were just covering it or through game trailers as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to game trailers all the time to be like, they have all the E3 trailers I'm going to watch. It was before YouTube was big. And I'd go there to watch everything I can. And I was just like, well, this one's different because you didn't have the kind of big characters like you did in this, where you felt like you were a threat for once and not like the underdog. It was kind of like you were big and powerful. And I was just like, okay, this looks new. And we were talking about this before we started the show, and it might have been the first game to bring in that awkward or a popular active reload system.
Yeah, well, none of us could really think of a title beforehand that actually had that, so that wouldn't surprise me. For me, the first time I actually saw anything about Gears of War that I knew of, because I had seen some of the earlier Unreal 3 engine demos, but the actual announcement back at 2005, that first demo when they showed it off, and you have the somewhat misshapen Marcus Phoenix, they hadn't really locked in how his face was going to look, and a lot of those details, but it blew me away just how amazing that game looked. Like, 360 was a system that I was trying to get into a little bit more when it first came out. I actually had a friend of mine bought me one, Jeremiah Noggle, back in the day. He decided he wanted me to play 360 bad enough because we were playing on original Xbox that they just bought me one, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna argue. I will take my 360 and play it. And really, really got into Gears. Yeah. So going from there, I guess we can jump into the games themselves to kind of talk about a few of them and kind of touch on those points. Um, so yeah, let's see what we got. We're gonna have fun with sound effects because they're all mixed up with weird titles, and I'm like, which one is it again? This is very informal. We're not going into a deep history on Gears of War. This is our memories and us playing these games and kind of having fun with it. I didn't want it to be, clinical with all the little details. I have a timeline of when these were released, so at least we know. And, Gears of War was released in 2006, shown off in 2005, and that was originally on Xbox 360 and on PC. And it's in a joking to our earlier conversation, because we recorded the episode 140 earlier. This is back, I guess, Xbox had exclusives, and then also was on PC later on. So who knows? I kid with
PC
that.
one was a proper PC one was a really good proper remake, because that was around the time that there was the whole remake remaster culture, and some of them
Yeah,
were quite like poor. And I remember the PC one, because they actually, in the PC one, they had that whole other chapter that only the PC version had for a long time.
yeah, they had that one, but there was a lot of like graphical issues. PCs at the time couldn't do like some of the lighting, some of the physics effects, things like that properly. So there
Yeah.
were a lot of negative sides to it. Because the 360, you got to remember, when the Xbox 360 came out, that thing was a computational beast. Like, there were mainline built computers that were not doing what this thing could do, because at the time, consoles usually tended to be higher end than PCs because they were more bespoke hardware. That
Yeah.
changed over the life of the 360 going on, and as new graphics cards and things came out. But by the time Gears came out, it was a showcase.
Yeah.
So we got Gears 1 around 2006. Gears of War 2 would come out a couple years later in 2008. Gears of War 3 was in 2011. We got Ram Shadow DLC for that. And then kind of rounding out what we'd call the original trilogy. I kind of want to put Gears of War Judgment in there, which was a late 360 2013 release. Because that contained the aftermath for Gears 3, which we'll talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's the first trilogy we'll talk about. Go ahead, Steven.
I do want to preface before we go forward that this episode is for people who have played the whole series, because we're not going to hold back on what we talk about.
Yeah, we're going to talk about story plots or
Spoiler warning.
anything that comes up. Telling
This
you
is your
now.
warning first. Go play the games.
Yeah.
We're recording this because we love the games, but please go play the games, and then you can compare your thoughts to ours.
Pretty much. So for Gears 1, or some of the first trilogy, I wanted to talk about some of our favorite memories of that. And Chase is our main one. I will start with you on some of your favorites.
So the thing that I kind of remember the most about the first game and just kind of the original trilogy as a whole, I think in an interview, Cliffy B had talked about how he used movies. I think Platoon and a couple other ones as a reference for the storytelling. Because when you think about it, and you don't necessarily recognize it at first, but the game is entirely centered around your character, Delta Squad, and like you don't get any cutscenes or anything that go off and see like what High Command's doing or anything else. It's all basically centered around what's happening at the ground level. And I think in a way that's actually a really beautiful way to tell that story. It was actually really like well done, and because you just kind of feel like you are a part of this like bigger thing, but um and it's also kind of conveyed in the voice acting and stuff too, is that you don't necessarily feel like you're winning or that you're like, you're doing the best. You just feel like you're this group of people that's just trying to make the best out of a shitty situation, and you're not necessarily sure you're doing the right thing. You're just doing what the best with what you have to deal with at the time.
All right.
um
Go ahead.
I was also going to say that the during our playthroughs, probably one of the funnier parts was that Jeremy always picked the right path.
I just made it a habit. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go right every single time just to see what happens in the whole playthrough.
Another favorite part of mine probably was the way they introduced General Rom. This it was a hell of an intro, actually, with him just like walking through the fire and then just showing up. And I think was it Min tries to chainsaw him and he just grabs the gun and he's just like, yeah, like this is
No.
not gonna work. It's like, oh crap.
Oh Lord. Steven, what about you? Got any memories or favorite parts from the first Gears trilogy?
I think what Gears helped for me though is because I want to say like from the first Gears on, kind of introduced me to visceral gameplay, to gibbing
Jibs.
of or jibs if you want to call it that. um, because after Gears and then when Gears 2 came out, then there was Dead Space. So both games, especially Gears, just everything had weight behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't get that in
Yeah.
some of the other shooters. It was very lighter. Like even Halo was very light, but Gears, every hit felt like it was like piercing, and everything was very in your face. When you were even when you burned, their character would scream. When they were dying, they'd leave a trail of blood as they crawled along the floor. You and the locusts.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that when you ran, it was kind of like a shaky cam. Like everything had
Yeah, the
weight behind
roadie
Oh
it.
yeah,
run.
the roadie run.
Wasn't just like
Yep.
regularly done. Even when you hit somebody, your whole screen shook. So it was kind of like you were put in the experience for once, so you felt it.
Well, that
So
roadie run really felt like a movie thing because it felt like you had a cameraman like running behind you carrying that
yeah, like
camera.
Yeah.
everything just felt like you were in the experience itself, and it wasn't like games nowadays where we get the term bullet sponges. Back then, it didn't feel like a bullet sponge. It felt like I was slowly wearing an enemy down. It was a refreshing change.
Yeah. I did like a lot of the AI in that one because they would try for different ones to kind of flank you or do different tactics. They could play dirty sometimes. Um, I know in some of the later ones, they got to the point they could run up and jump over your cover because that's one of the biggest things. Is this is a cover shooter? That's one of the bigger functions of it. Is you get into cover, hold your point, and try and push your way forward. But they figured out how to run up and they would jump over and kick you, which I always hated when they do that because you're just like, what the shit?
Yeah, they introduced
Um,
that in 4.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, some of those just got aggravating. Um, one thing in regards to this, not so much of the game itself, but one of the older Comic Cons, San Diego Comic Cons I went to, I took my son Jeremy with me, and I got to talk with some of the people that were there for Gears of War. And of course, they had a bunch of the life size weapons there. You know, they had the Lancer, which is the chainsaw gun that, let me grab my Marcus Phoenix here, the very famous design for that with the chainsaw. And they had a few of the other ones because this was a little bit later on, but I was like, yeah, I'm going to get pictures with Jeremy, who, by the way, was like 10 years old at the time, holding these. They were very uncomfortable. They're like, I don't know if this is for a child. I was like, he's fine. Let him hold it. It was
Yeah, and
just holding. Yeah.
until like later games and stuff, like Gears 1 gave you the sense of you, even though you were playing a shooter, you were scared. Like when I first fought the Berserker, I was just like, what do I do with this thing that just keeps running at me? And then you find out like it's also a female enemy too, and you're just like, okay, this thing's not only pursuing me, but it's just screaming nonstop and going through everything from walls and you.
Well, it was
Um,
the game had a really good use of audio and the fact that they were
Mhm.
they're blind, so they hear everything. So all your sound matters
yeah,
as you.
I'd be amiss if I didn't give my hats off to D. Bradley Baker, who, among his many voicing credits, when I saw him at a video games live concert, he went on stage and he let everybody know that that wasn't computerized editing. That was him doing the Berserker scream. That was him doing the locusts, and like that's
Good
what
lord.
helped like him like calm it down to do Perry the Platypus. But when he really went into it, like I'm like, you did all the locusts, and he's like, sure did, and the Berserker, because he knew how to do the scream with his mouth, and I was just like, that's insane. Everybody
Yeah.
put their heart and soul into these into the voice acting, and I had met Dom at one of the New York Comic Cons, got a picture with him, and then I never saw him again. I don't know what happened. And then I got to be part of sitting on a panel that had John DiMaggio, and when I would ask him like his easiest or hardest role, he said definitely Gears of War was his hardest because a lot of stuff he had to do because of again how heavy and how much weight went behind it. It was a lot of screaming, a lot of screaming.
Yeah, I mean, because that's one thing I want to point out is like the designs. I always loved like here's my Marcus Phoenix, one of the figures. This almost feels a little thin because the way the game would look, like you were so bulky, everything had that weight to it. So when you'd walk, you'd hear the clomping of the boots and the armor shifting around and things. And they animated it really well because you would see that. It wasn't just like an
Yeah.
Iron Man suit where it's just on you and smooth. Like everything was moving and it just felt like you were a tank running around. Not as far as like Warhammer type, but getting there.
Definitely
Like
inspired by though.
Yeah.
for
Definitely.
sure. Um, they toned and I'm glad they didn't make it every single character, but like everybody had at least a similar through line, like of how the designs were. Even like the female characters, when they would come in, they weren't small. Like they still had good bits of armor. They weren't like wearing metal bikinis while shooting stuff. Like they had full vests. They might have their arms showing, but then some of the male characters did too. So whatever was going for one could go for the other without any kind of restriction. It was just armor. And I don't know. I always thought that design was always very well done. One thing I do remember from the original Gears of War, which was very much a sign of the times, is how brown everything could be. Like that was the era of brown. Brown reigned supreme as the color choice because,
Yeah.
but they did have like really nice colored touches that would come in. The blood splatter and stuff like that, of course, was a key red you'd see pop up. Your muzzle fire and stuff like that. Like the environment was supposed to look worn down because this was what over a decade, like 14 years after the
Yeah.
emergence day when the main villain, which we'll talk about as well, the Locust, first showed up. Um, and they, everything from them, they live underground. They look all grizzled and for their design. So this was one of the first games I think I remember playing where the world was really, it felt just fucked up to put it bluntly. Like everything was
Yeah.
breaking and falling apart. Um, and you see that more now with like Fallout and things like that, but Gears really hit with a lot of it. And I think the biggest part of that was the first trailer they put out that had the song we opened the show with, Mad World. And for a lot of people, that was their first introduction where you had Marcus kind of running through the destroyed environment, which looked phenomenal, splashing through water and hiding from locusts that are running around. And I remember specifically he finds the face of the statue in the water and he like tilts it up to show the nice pristine side of it while the rest of it's broken off. And it ended with the Corpser, which was supposed to be a big enemy in the game that didn't really show up much in the first game. They had it in the trailer showing that big spidery looking thing, but it felt hopeless. Like that game was not trying to make you feel all powerful. It's like you're here to try not to die, but you're probably going to. Your world is destroyed. You're dealing with this. And I gotta say, this is a series that got really dark. Like it had some funny moments, mind you, some absolutely hilarious ones, but some of the darkest shit I've seen in gaming. I think that kind of leads us into more
Yeah,
of
they
Gears
didn't
of War 2.
they didn't
Yeah,
shy they didn't shy away from killing anybody off. Poor Anthony Carmine. He was just like, my gun's jammed, see? And then just the sniper just boom.
Yeah, that's a whole running thing we'll talk about as well. But go ahead, Steven.
But yeah, they even set the scene. Like you read the first, uh, like line or so on the back of the first game, and it just says the planet lies in ruin, cities crumbling, man's greatest works fallen, humanity is cornered, nowhere to run. Locust horde has risen, and they won't stop coming. They won't stop killing. So it's not painting a good picture for you right in that first little passage there.
Yeah, you're not going to get very many flower fields in this one. Go ahead, Chase.
Well, and the way that they did the voice acting too is just really good because in I think in Gears 1, after you get out of the prison, then you meet one of the I think your commanding officer, which is Victor Hoffman, and as he's giving Lieutenant Kim like the breakdown of like, oh, we've got this light mass bomb, we're gonna, and I think he says, quote unquote, we're gonna take these bastards out in one shot. And you hear Dom, the camera pans back to Dom and Marcus, and Dom literally says, like under his breath, yeah, right. Like even they don't believe that whatever it is that they're doing is necessarily going to work because nothing they've done has worked. Like it's just this, and that's what I was meaning about just you don't necessarily feel like you don't feel like you're winning, you just feel like you're potentially delaying like losing, so to speak. It's interesting. It's really well done.
Yeah, the story is never afraid to let you fail. Like you could work and fight through an entire level. Like you fight to get the light mass bomb down there, and then it goes off and nothing happens. Like it just doesn't work. And you're just like, what the hell? It's supposed to be the big dramatic.
Or every time you go
save
through
the
a
world.
door, you might actually throw a grenade by accident. It happens. It gets hopeless.
Never gonna let me live that down, are you?
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, it didn't kill me as much as it did in some other games, but I think I've killed myself in Rainbow Six more with grenades like that.
Because when you finish, because at the end of Gears, you detonate the bomb and all this stuff. Everyone's like, "Woo, yeah!" And then like what? Gears of War 2 is set like not that far after the first one, and you're like getting in this huge convoy to be yeeted down through the earth in these grind lifts to like fight them on their front type thing, and you're just like, wait a minute, I thought this thing was supposed to be like great.
Dom was right.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
like
right.
Gears 1 was desolate, and it was kind of a proving ground for the series. We didn't, they didn't know if they were going to make more of them, how that was going to go. But everybody, on the second one, that's when they were really pushing like for they were doing the next tech demo. We can have like hundreds of, these drones running around in mass. Like they were doing really good with groups, which really got used in Gears 2. I remember, do you remember the demo with the meat cube? They're just shooting this block of meat and like showing how it ripples and takes the impact and stuff. And that ended up becoming the giant worm. Because Gears 2, you're running around in a giant worm for part of it.
Man, yeah.
But going back, you were talking about the voice actors for this, and I wanted to kind of go through some of those real fast. Because Marcus Phoenix is the main character. That's John DiMaggio. And if you're not sure who John DiMaggio is, well, he's also Bender from Futurama. He's Finn the dog from Adventure Time. And then Marcus Phoenix. That's like, none of these characters seem like they would, if they ran into each other, it'd be so confusing.
Bro's got range.
You mean Jake the dog?
Say what?
You mean Jake the dog?
He's got range. Did I say? What did I say? Finn. I said
So
Finn the
you
dog.
said
Didn't I?
Finn. I only know because I play a lot of
It is Jake the
multiverses.
dog.
But
Sorry, I'm already hearing people get mad about that. I mix up the names sometimes. But joining him was his buddy Santiago, Dom Santiago in the game, who is voiced by Carlos Ferro, and those two are kind of like basically brothers, like not literally but figuratively brothers, like you are with like really close friends. Which a lot of this first part of the trilogy plays into is the relationship between those two. Um, and then of course you've got the other two, we'll call it the lovely couple that are with you, which is Baird, played by Fred Tatascore. I can't pronounce the last name
the
correctly. I
Hulk,
apologize.
yeah.
And then Coltrane, played by Lester Spite. And Coltrane or Lester Spite puts in every bit of effort into that character.
Oh
That man
man,
is energetic.
they all did though. So good.
I think he started every recording with like a bit of cocaine and a bunch of coffee because he's just woo. He's just yelling about everything. Oh, it's fantastic. Um. So yeah, Gears 2, yeah, like you said, started off with us raining down. Like they showed off a bunch of the showpieces where in the vehicles fighting people, and you're on the mounted guns, and that's when they're showing the big hordes of creatures coming in. Because that was the only thing with Gears 1 is you can only have a couple creatures at a time that would come up, and they would usually come through emergence holes,
Yep.
which of course that had the mechanic where you could throw grenades into them to stop them early if you didn't want to deal with a bunch of them coming out. So when we're playing, we're yelling at each other, you know, you got a grenade, throw it in the hole. Like, you go get that one, I'll get this one. If you didn't have grenades, good luck. You're gonna have to kill everything until it finally stops and it closes up naturally, which can take a little bit. But Gears 2, like I said, they had where you could have tons of these things running in, which is when they would usually prop you up with a minigun of some sort, like a mounted gun, and just let you just start shooting into the crowd, which was great. But yeah, I think this is one of the darkest of the games
Oh yeah.
compared to a lot of them. Um, so in this one of the biggest parts is in regards to Dom searching for his wife Maria. We'll get to her in a little bit, but
Looks dead to me.
um, and then yeah. So what was the other the big guy with the tattoo in his face? Ty.
Ty Kaliso.
He is just an absolute badass in the beginning. Nothing seems to kill that guy. Like they purposely, there's accidents and everything else going on. And this is one of the first times I've seen kind of this twist. So this one leads to us finding that people are being held prisoner in these like torture containers. And you find Maria, and this is one of the more sad ones because Dom's all excited. He finally found his wife after this fight. And you get to her, and she kind of falls out, and she looks perfectly fine until Marcus taps his shoulder asking what's going on, and you see that she is just withered away. And I thought they were just going to be like, oh, she died, and go from there. Hands him the gun. You see him walk away, and you hear him shoot his wife. And I was like, holy shit. That was hardcore.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, was that did you found Ty first or her first? I don't
You
remember.
find Ty first. You
Yeah.
find her quite a bit later in the game.
That's what I
And
thought.
Ty,
You want to explain what happened to Ty? Oh,
Yeah, so in how you kind of find out about them capturing people is actually quite well done because you're trying to find Baird, and then you find Baird locked up in one of these, like, it looks like this metal coffin type thing,
Mhm.
and then you get him out, and then Baird's like, you know, and I can't do the Baird voice, but he's like, they're taking people prisoner, man. He's like, they're torturing people. He's like, I was about to be next. He's all like wired, right? He's like, we got to get the hell out of here. Well, then you hop on one of those barges. There's like, I think they call them like gas barges because it's basically just like this giant bloated locust balloon thing that's
Right.
alive. And when you get on the barge, you kill everybody that's on the barge. You go to the lower level, then you open up you pull a lever, opens up all the cells, and Ty walks out. And you see Ty at first. He looks perfectly fine, other than he just doesn't have he's just bare chested. He doesn't have his armor on. And
Yeah.
then Marcus is like, Ty, good to see you, and then hands him a shotgun. But then the camera flips. You see his back has all these like massive gashes in it, and he's
Mm-hmm.
got like these hooks that are like stuck through his skin and stuff. And then Ty just like has this look on his face, and then you see the gun. He points the gun, the Nasher shotgun, up to his chin, and then all of a sudden Marcus looks back and just sees him off himself. It was like, holy crap.
Headshot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Marcus is just like, no. And it was this
It was
yeah,
heart wrenching because I mean that's when they were first
was.
realizing how tortured these people were, and it wasn't like, oh man, you've been through so much. Here, take a health pack, or here's a stim pack. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that damage is done. Like it is just.
And yeah, because I think Marcus said earlier in the game that Ty survives everything. Because that's just, yeah, like you said, because there was like all the accidents and other stuff. It didn't matter. Ty just went through it all. And even Ben Carmine, who's Anthony Carmine's brother, we'll get to in a moment. He, even he's just standing there, just looking at him, and he's just like, I thought Ty survived everything or whatever. And then Baird's like, see, I told you they're breaking people, man. And Marcus is like, let's just get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, that still haunts me just how dark that was because they pulled it off so well, but you could see like the facial animation was so well done with these games. Like you
Yeah.
could see the despair and he had just given up in his face and handed him the gun, assumed he'd be fine, like everybody else thought he'd be fine, and just that was it. So yeah, that led later on to Dom finding Maria and how they made the transition between like her looking perfect and then what she actually looked like was like out of a horror movie for back then. You're just like, oh man, she
Yeah.
looks fine. It's
Like,
amazing. She survived this. And this
just
is like,
completely pale and gaunt. And
she's
yeah,
basically a corpse that was still breathing.
yeah.
Like mentally, she seemed like she was completely gone. I think they even animated like a little bit of drool. Like she was just done.
Yeah, because
And
there was that was like a labor camp. We found them in like you find her in like a labor camp.
mhm. But the fact, I mean, I understand. I think at one point they thought about letting you actually do the action, like pull the trigger, but they kind of shied away from that and just had it be a cutscene, which I think makes sense. That's probably the better choice.
Yeah, that scene also led into because then after he shoots or whatever, they
mhm.
kind of give you like that black screen, like they fade to black and then fade back to Marcus, and then which kind of emphasizes a little bit of time's passed, obviously, and then Marcus is holding the helmet of like a Theron guard,
Mhm.
and that's where they didn't end up putting it in the game, but I think they put it in a like a bonus disc if you got like a collector's edition or something,
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
where the deleted scene was supposed to come in. There was supposed to be a choice that you would have where you could either um
I would have chosen
just
right.
yeah, there's a scene where you could, because Marcus says he's like, we could either try to go in quietly or we could just, he's like, I understand if you just want to go in guns blazing, and they ended up just doing it to where you just go, but there was
Yeah.
going to be the choice of posing as Therons or just going in guns blazing.
And they did release toys like I was showing, I got my Marcus Phoenix and them. I do have them in the Theron armor.
Yeah.
They're still in storage right now, so I didn't have a chance to get those out, but it's kind of funny they did manage to release the figures for that DLC that never happened. They look really nice though.
I can't remember. I think Cliffy talked about in an interview why they took that segment out, but I can't remember what it. Off the top of my head, I can't remember obviously what the reasoning was.
Might have just been the system of them just trying to build it. Like it just took too much
Yeah,
time to do both of it to make a stealth version and a loud action one was probably the big one. Um, but yeah, trying to think what else. Like for Gears 2, we had Gears 2 was the worm, if I remember correctly,
Yeah, that's
that we
where
had to go through. That was nasty. Um, you're going through this entire thing. We're like cutting through tissue and finding like all the little creatures inside that are trying to do it. It's this giant worm that's eating the base out of the cities and causing them to sink.
Yeah.
And I think the last one they were going for was Jacinto, if I remember correctly.
So
Or was that?
Jacinto Plateau was
Mhm.
it was a plateau that apparently my understanding of the story was it was such a dense hard rock that they couldn't actually burrow through it.
Mhm.
So what they did was they were using the worm to sink all these cities, and what they figured out was they were sinking cities around Jacinto, and they were just going to drop the whole plateau.
Yep.
Was what they were going for.
So I remember, like I said, inside the worm, fighting through that one. That was when they were showing off a lot of the tech between the flesh rendering, so
Hmm.
you could see like everything jiggling and moving around. But you had to go through it. I remember we had to cut like 5 or 6 hearts out of this thing, and like they'd have blood like spraying everywhere and like pulling up, and we're going through it. It's like the taste has to be absolutely terrible at this point because there's no way you've not gotten that in your mouth.
Oh yeah, not just in when you're cutting through that, but then also in like when you're just even chainsawing a locust. Like every now and again, one of the characters will be like, "Oh, it's in my mouth."
Go ahead, Steven.
So maybe you guys may have missed something.
Oh,
According to what I'm reading, it says in early July 2009, Epic Games applied a fourth update to Gears of War 2, basically called Dark Corners. The add-on consisted of 7 new multiplayer maps, but an additional campaign chapter that was originally deleted, where you could choose to either sneak into the stronghold as Theron guards or charge in as in the original game. Though the level
Um,
is different from the one that appeared in the final game, and it also features a cameo from a stranded character from the original Gears. So it is in the game
I don't
as
remember
an
that
update.
even showing up as an option when we played through it, though.
They're giving the date, July 28th,
uh,
2009, the Dark Corners add-on.
I think I do remember something about that because because I think we did play that. Um, did we? Because I think I know what you're talking about. Because it's the guy from the gas station that you get the APC from in the first game. He shows
But
back up.
you do get to make the choice, yeah. Which he would have chose to go in because you said he always chooses right. So you would
I
have had to
do.
go guns blazing again.
I'll have to go back and look and see because I don't remember that popping up, and I'm wondering if it's a thing with how it updated on the Series X or for backwards compatibility when we played it. Because Gears
Could
2
be.
never got. Normally they have all that included though. Like they were putting all the maps and everything in there.
Yeah, it's interesting because Gears did a lot of, here's a little bit more they did with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their updates, which was always nice.
Oh, I think I know
Yeah.
what it is because I think we did play it, Jeremy, but it's not in the actual like main game as an
It's
option
not, yeah.
still. But you have to go. I think when you go to downloadable content, it's in there. You can play that deleted
Oh,
chapter or whatever. Because I do remember us playing it. Now that I think about it,
maybe I thought it was a different part then.
yeah.
Okay. People are gonna be listening to this, and be like, "Well, you don't
Looks
know
dead to
about that."
me.
Yeah.
In the Worm 2, in Gears 2, the I guess the other thing to bring up is that in the Worm is where you see the very sad and gruesome death of
Oh,
one Ben Carmine,
that was terrible.
relation brother to Anthony Carmine.
So this is when once is an incident, twice is starting a pattern. Like you're getting all the Carmines are fucked. Almost all of them.
But that it sparked the probably one of the best like fan kind of engagement things that they did, which we'll talk about in 3.
Yeah, they really should have had Sean Bean do the voice of Benjamin Carmine.
Have him voice every Carmine.
It would have been great.
Jesus. All right. Let's move on then to Gears 3. So Gears of War 3 was more of a, hey, we've haven't really won. We're kind of trying to do what we can, surviving on this ship. Is much more depressing, like just getting what you can. So everyone's looking for supplies. You're going out on supply runs, things like that. Um, it did have a really good first level though on that ship as you're fighting your way through as it crashes. I thought that was a lot of fun and really well done. And you see a lot of people die and you lose some tomatoes, which makes them very mad.
Oh yeah, dumb.
uh, I think I believe it was shown in earlier ones, but this had one of the better what I thought was for like the silverbacks. I remember silverbacks, were those in 2 or is that just a 3 thing?
Oh, it wasn't two.
It
Pretty sure it
wasn't 2,
was in
yeah.
two.
Yeah, because I think you can get the achievement for with the gun ones, but this one had ones without them. But we had the whole fighting on deck as things are coming up and using the silverbacks, which I thought was really well. But then you have this giant tentacle creature, which leads to you can hear Baird and Cole are trying to find a way to kill it. But that's the other thing is like we have a new enemy that's popped up, like these weird spiky things appeared. I guess we kind of skipped over the end of 2 with the whole explosion with the lambent and stuff. Or no, that was 3. That was 3. Now I'm getting all mixed
Well,
up.
two.
2, yeah, 2
So
had some of the lambent.
yeah, so in 1 you kind of got a small taste of them because there was
Mm-hmm.
lambent wretches. There's an enemy called wretches, which they run on all fours. They have
Mm-hmm.
this screech that is so like loud that it actually shatters glass, things like that. And then if you killed the lambent, they would explode. So there was like that little bit of it was basically a way of trying to entice you to not necessarily use the chainsaw on them,
Mm-hmm.
because if you use the chainsaw they would die and explode right next to you and you would take damage from it.
Yeah, I
In
got knocked
2
down a
they
lot
kind
by
of
those
push
things.
yeah, in 2 they push the lambent storyline more because they eventually you figure out that the locust the reason why the locust are attacking you is
Mm-hmm.
because the emulsion, which is like this yellow glowing fuel source that you fought, that the humans fought this big war over called the Pendulum Wars.
Yep.
The it's actually mutating the locust and it's mutating the planet itself, and so the locusts are turning lambent. The lambent are fighting against the regular locusts, so the locusts are trying to get up to the surface to get away from the lambent and the emulsion, which then leads into 3, where basically the lambent have kind of just taken over and they're coming up out of the ground through stalks, as they're called, like these
Mm-hmm.
tree-like things. And there's basically lambent mutations for like everything now.
Yeah. So you start seeing more of those on the ship. I remember, trying to fight those down while trying to get to the helicopters. You've got different characters just kind of popping up out of everywhere. But one thing I do like is you find out, like, because you hear whatever Baird and Cole are doing, and you see the reaction to what happens as the tentacles explode. But there is the next game, which we'll kind of cover combined with this one because they're kind of the same part, was Gears of War Judgment, which wasn't really a sequel. It was kind of a prequel, but it had a DLC called Aftermath, which actually let you play as Baird and Cole during that whole part, and led to, I think, the funniest line in the entire game.
No, Aftermath was something else.
Oh no, go ahead.
The What you're thinking of is because you played as Marcus and Dom on the ship, and then they did kind of one of those like, this is what was happening parallel to that, and then you play as
Yeah, that's
Cole
what I thought it
Baird.
was. Yeah.
Aftermath was when Baird and Cole find what's his name, Paddock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a little bit that tied into later into the Gears 3 story.
Oh, because I remember they had the DLC that covered that. I thought that's what Aftermath was. Sorry about that.
No.
But while you're
You can-
playing that part, kind of showing it, and Stephen, I saw you were raising your hand on that. What
Yeah.
you got anything?
Because the interesting thing, which is why people kind of loved his storytelling, is he thought the same way. Mr. Cliff, don't call me Cliffy B. Blazinski was just like, after 3, he's like, it would make sense to do a prequel, but people were so ingrained into the visceral part of Gears chainsawing so much that he was like, wait a minute, if I do a prequel, which is a big thing about the new game we'll talk about um, is they didn't figure that out yet. They were
yeah,
breaking their bayonets on the locusts, and they were like, we need something that can take them down. And they eventually got into chainsaws.
Hmm.
So what he decided to do is he just like, well, how about we make like kind of fill in the blank. So it took place after E-Day, where a few months later they had
Right.
found out what works. Because then they could have the chainsaws, which everybody knew that chainsawing the big guys was essential to Gears of War at the time. It was kind of like the hook that they would put by this time in the 4th Gears title, and because he said like he would have loved at the time to do Pendulum Wars, but that wouldn't have worked either because then there's no chainsaws and there's no scary monsters yet. So
Right.
for him, it wouldn't be Gears of War right at its height. So I think once people, I think the timing is right now because with the setting you wanted, because like Judgment gave kind of like, we're gonna fill in the rest of the blanks, almost like an epilogue
Right.
of how a lot of things came to be, and then we're gonna show how things are going afterwards in the next few games.
Gotcha. I guess I'm just mixing up the titles of the DLC because you remember which one I'm talking about, though.
yeah. Because there was Aftermath, and then there was um.
Well,
So
Gears 3
so
had Ram's Shadow as well, but that was a whole
yep,
different thing.
and that was a prequel
Yeah.
to 1,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of explained the story of Lieutenant Kim, and I think it was Jay Stratton. You see Jay Stratton make an appearance.
Mm-hmm.
In the
He
Aftermath campaign set during Gears of War 3, Baird and company returned to Halvo Bay with Clayton Carmine to find a ship and
yeah
reinforcements for the assault on Azura.
yeah. So when
Yeah, because it does eventually end with them doing that part though
yeah
for that, so it does connect. I was right about that part. I just
yeah
remember.
the bridge scene with the ship that you were thinking of, that was just you played as Marcus and Dom and Jace and Anya, and then it did the flashback.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's 17 years later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's supposed to be them getting that part, and that's when you're playing. You hear the radio calls from before,
yeah.
where Marcus and them are talking to you, and you're trying to blow this thing up, kick the explosives down with all of that.
And
But
then
just
the
you want to go ahead and tell the
Leviathan.
part because I know you love that part, Chase. The
Oh no, I
line.
was just gonna say then the Leviathan blows the bridge up, and we get the best line ever in Gears of War.
So give the backstory on that one because it's Baird and what was the lady's name?
The Australian lady Sam.
Yeah, yes.
Samus Aran.
Oh,
So
it's
yeah,
they
That's what
go
I
hate
told
ahead.
each
her.
other.
They absolutely hate each other. Which ironically in later games they end up together anyways, which I find fucking hilarious. But the bridge is exploding. They're sliding down. Baird's holding on, and he looks at her and he's like, "What was he said? Like,
I think this is the part where I said I've always loved you, but I don't. I really, really don't.
and they just let go."
You
I
didn't
thought,
expect him to say something like that either.
yeah, it's like we're about to die. I don't like you. Bye.
Yeah, Baird was I think that's part of the reason why he got that judgment. That's why they made that judgment game, was because Baird became this fan favorite because through all 3 of the games he had this, he was always just played the smart ass. He always had something smart ass to say about any situation, and it was just off the cuff and hilarious just for the time.
Let me see here.
Yeah, if I, since we're talking about memories,
Mm-hmm.
this was kind of when Gears of War 4 and 5 were needed for me because I felt Gears of War Judgment was losing its way. I know my friend and I, when we first played it, we called the game Gears of Door because everything was just doors to get to the next story element, doors to get to the next one. And since last episode we talked about tropes in gaming, this one is only very specific to Gears, but I do not like declassified missions at all.
Oh,
When
I
they
get
were, because you would have the best weapons, and then Baird would be like, "Oh yeah, we just had pistols," and then all your weapons are gone.
I liked the idea behind it to mix things up. Like if you'd played it a bunch
Yeah.
and gone through the story and you wanted to do it, I think what drove
I
you nuts
just,
is we had the
I
hard
just
rule
think it
of we
should have
have to do
appeared.
every one of them.
I just think it should have appeared in, excuse me, New Game Plus. It should have not been in the original campaign. I don't think that's just me. Though.
The Gears of
Oh,
War
man.
Judgment had some pretty hilarious moments anyway. But Gears of War Judgment was that was People Can Fly, wasn't it? That was the bullet. Was it Bulletstorm
Bulletstorm,
guys?
yeah.
Yep. So guys,
That's how they
Yeah.
got that one, was because how well Bulletstorm turned out, I think. But with Gears 3, like I said, they're surviving on the ship. You're going out to different places to find survivors to see how that's going. That's when you also, like, they have the Lambent Brumach, which the Brumach is one we didn't really talk about that did show up all the way back in Gears 1, which is like this giant beastly thing with two big guns on its arms with a rider on the back. And
Yeah.
those things were terrifying to see running around. They became almost comedic later on. I know, I'm trying to think which game it was we were playing that had the Lambent Brumach fight where we had to fight it inside the facility. I think that was a little bit later. That might have been 4.
We have 2 where you're riding them.
Yeah, that
at
was
the
great.
end, and then the one of your Brumachs turns into, or the Brumach that you're riding turns lambent, and you use it as a big bomb to blow up a pillar to help sink Jacinto.
Yeah, because they were trying to sink that to bring the water in to flood it.
Yeah,
which is what led to the stocks and all that stuff too. I just remember, like I said, we played so many of these; they're kind of blending together.
So
but
the first time you fight a Brumach was in Gears 1, which was the extra chapter that they added in the remake, the PC. What was first the PC remake, and then they ended up making the Ultimate Edition, which had the extra content that you could finally play on console. And that one, you fight the Brumach at I think it's the power station.
Yeah, we didn't get Ultimate Edition until 2015 on Xbox One, because that was the first Xbox One specific version that they made, where they kind of added all in and called it Ultimate Edition because it was supposed to be running the game on the ultimate setting, going from that. Anyways, all right. Let's see what else we got here.
I want to bring up something that few people will probably ask about, because it became a staple since the first one. Gears, as well as being hard hitting, also decided in every single numbered game. I think even Judgment may have skipped it. But 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all have what's called the Seriously achievement. So I would just like to go quickly down the line and let you know what each one was for each game.
Oh, these are
So
insane.
Seriously achievement in the first one was kill 10,000 people in versus ranked matches total. Okay, so then in Gears 2, Seriously 2.0, kill 100,000 enemies in any mode, but still you have to kill 100,000 enemies. Not what people look forward to anymore.
Well, you would sit there and use the turret to just milk the levels with all those people just going, I'm just going to be here a minute.
Let's go to Gears 3. Seriously 3.0. You have to reach level 100 and earn every Onyx medal, which is, as we'll all say, is not an easy feat at all.
No.
The Seriously 4.0 in Gears 4 is complete the whole campaign on insane difficulty, earn all the ribbons at least once, and earn a rank placement in each mode. And you're like, okay, how can they one up this? All right. So lastly, let's go to Seriously 5.0 in Gears 5. In order to get this achievement, you have to complete the insane campaign. You have to master all 7 Horde launch maps, all 4 escape launch maps, and you have to master at least, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 classes to level 15. Yay. So seriously, if you have any of the achievements, consider yourself a Gears of War fanatic, because these are not easy feats, and some of them, if you're gonna start them now, good luck.
Yeah, consider talking to a doctor. At this point, you're so exposed, you might be lambent. Oh man, but yeah, Gears, the original trilogy and Judgment. I know Judgment, they were trying something different, and I like the fact that they were at least experimenting with it. But it did get to the point of like small rooms, like you're just playing in a
Yeah.
little area and going from there. Um, but like in general, how did you feel about that first trilogy? Like after you completed the story in 3, Judgment being a bonus thing, like how did you feel if that was all of it?
Oh, I was absolutely delighted with the series. Absolutely loved it. Gears 3 I thought was quite funny because Gears 3 had the um, had the fan engagement of, because Gears 1 had Anthony Carmine die, Gears 2 had Benjamin Carmine die, and so then Gears 3 they actually did a thing where the fans got to vote on if the Gears 3 Carmine was going to live or die. And Gears 3 Carmine was Clayton. And that was the way they did his character was quite cool because he was is actually no, he wasn't the first, but he had he didn't have arms. He didn't have like any armor on his arms. He just had these
He had
jacked
arms, he
like
didn't have armor.
yeah, he didn't have armor on his like arms. He just had these jacked arms, but then on his shoulders he had one shoulder he had Anthony and one shoulder he had Benjamin tattooed on him. I remember because like if you were because team basically team don't kill Carmine won won the vote, won the contest, but through the whole game they teased so many times where you just like puckered up because you thought he was gonna die. You're just like no, and then he'd survive. And just like oh,
Even after
so
that, with what happened with Ty, you're just like, oh, what's gonna happen to him? Like he's
yeah.
surviving. It's happening too much.
Because then at one point, because I think at one point his helicopter crashes, you're just like, oh fuck, and then like he shows up, and you're just like, holy crap, it's awesome.
I'm trying to
So
remember if he was the one that like took a bullet to the head, but like his helmet stopped it. Like he just like it hit
yeah,
and he lived. He's like,
that
what the hell?
that that dude with the sniper rifle shot at, and I think it ricocheted off of his helmet. He's like, thank God I was wearing a helmet.
Oh
um,
man.
as a whole, though, I think the original trilogy was really really good. Judgment, I appreciated what they were trying to do with it, but it fell short for a lot of people for obvious reasons. And yeah,
Steven put it at himself.
the classified missions were while they were fun and they made for some hilarious moments, they some of them were quite frustrating.
Steven was
Oh
so
yeah,
mad
and
every time. Like,
the
I finally
room
got my
was
gun.
yeah, oh yeah, and the building just mysteriously filled with poison gas, so we had to like hurry up and get like get to the end of the level. It's like, oh no.
Yeah. Some of those were
And then
ridiculous, hateful. Just
the the fact that grenades all of a sudden were tied to a button rather than like you selecting
I think that was
them.
Jeremy's favorite part, though.
oh my god.
It was my
I
favorite
died so
part.
many times because of that. I killed somebody. I'd go to a door.
Um,
My bad, my bad.
I swear Jeremy would swear more than Marcus Phoenix would whenever he got to a door.
Oh.
The one of the things that I think the series as a whole did really well with the original trilogy that I didn't necessarily think the next few games did was
Mhm.
they had really good um, they did this really interesting thing where if they introduced you to a new mechanic or a new enemy or anything, they would do it in a way that they would seclude you,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd actually like show you how this new mechanic worked or how this new enemy acted before they all of a sudden just like would expose you to it just constantly later through the
Right.
and I thought that was really well done because you never felt like in Gears you were never like what do I do, where do I go, how do I get past this, like you always were exposed to it first in a controlled environment before then
Mm-hmm.
releasing you into it.
All right, Stephen. What about you? Any thoughts on the original trilogy plus Judgment? Like just kind of your feeling and playing through it.
I kind of like to classify this as kind of like the Cliffy B era, where
Makes sense.
you know, where basically he had his hands in everything, so everything went his way. Um, I felt when they did change developers, it kind of lost some of the luster, or it gained some of the luster and lost some of the brown. but
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
but I think it was that. I think, and that's why we got that first one remastered for Xbox One, which just took it to a whole nother level because
Yeah.
they knew what they had there was like, the original trilogy for a lot of people. Whether this causes a rift for people or not, is kind of like the original trilogy for Star Wars, where it's just how everybody liked things of how it worked, how it was
Mm-hmm.
going, how it was set up, um, the pacing, um, the fact that one of them, put you in a hopeless state. Two of them were just like, we're gonna throw in a red wedding for you guys. Look it up if you don't mind getting Game of Thrones spoiled.
Oh
And then Gears 3 was just starting to be like, okay, things could be looking up. And then Gears of Door Judgment was just like, we're here to remind you that things didn't go very well.
I think we'd be remiss to forget probably one of the most sad, sad moments, like one of the saddest moments in gaming, though, in Gears 3,
Mm-hmm.
with the death of a certain character.
First spoiler. Go for it.
Um, that scene where you're at the pumping station, pumping the truck full of emulsion,
Yep.
and you're basically surrounded by you got jokers on your left, jokers on your right. You've got the regular locusts who are like savage and feral. They're trying to kill you, and then you've got the Lambent on the other side. They're trying to kill you.
Yeah, you got all the people themselves.
Yeah, and then that's where they brought in the Lambent people, because at first, Lambent only affected the locust. It hadn't affected the humans yet until you find that part of the campaign. And Dom decides to commit the ultimate self-sacrifice and take this truck and drive it into the pumping station to just blow everybody up. And
Looks dead to
Going down
me.
the highway on a one-way track.
yeah,
Calls them on the radio while they're doing it too. He's like, I gotta do this. Oh boy.
oh
Because
yeah, then
they make it look like he's running, like because he gets in the truck and takes off, and they tried to make it look like he's gonna run away, and it's like it's dumb.
But
He ain't running
if
anywhere.
if
yeah,
if you had played the games very closely together, it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of a poignant part where you thought, at least for yourself, you thought a character that you've been playing as, all the characters you've been playing as,
Mm-hmm.
um, that just like in the movies, the celebrities are the ones who survive. So you're thinking, oh, I'm a main character,
Dom
like
was the
I'm going to
player too. Dom
like
was always
I'm the
player too.
survivor. But then you kind of just saw him finally break down, and he's just like, I saw what Ty went through, and I miss my wife, and I just want to meet her. So it kind of like wrapped around as a conclusion for his story, where
Yeah.
you felt so bad for him, and you're like, I don't know how to feel any kind of joy for Dom, and this was like the worst but best way because he got to meet his wife again.
Yeah, and then because he drives through the tunnel, he does the 180, and then he starts driving back, and then as he's driving through there, and he's telling Marcus, just jump, like get out of there, blah, all of this stuff. And Marcus starts to figure out like, oh fuck, this is he's not. No, stop! What the fuck are you doing? And
Yeah.
then they start playing that Mad World again. They play that intro to Mad World. You're just like, holy shit! It just added to the emotion of the scene.
I've played enough Gears to know where this is going.
Yeah, yeah. Gears was
He's
not
not
afraid
gonna-
to kill off a character.
He's
They were
not
not
going to win the
afraid.
war right now.
No.
And they would make it look like, you know, Dom or Marcus might be dying or something, but this is the first time a main just went, you know, the playable ones. And from that point on, anybody could be a possibility of having that happen. And that actually does come into play in some of the later ones. For me, the first Gears of War trilogy, I thought was kind of very concise as the Xbox 360 era. It was a peak of their gaming time. Cat's messing with your camera. It's hilarious.
Cat mine.
You know, because as that went along, you could see like Gears of War 1 was this masterpiece of how it played, how it ran, how other systems weren't able to keep up with it. And then Gears 2 kind of expanded that, but we were starting to get the PC releases. And then Gears 3 was the highest they could go with it, I think, for a lot of that stuff. It was kind of pushing the 360 to its max, which led to Judgment being more self-contained, like you were talking about, Stephen. I mean, I'm glad they at least tried something different. I like it, you know, because it was supposed to be a side story, and it kind of tied into it, but it really was like that peak of Microsoft's time with the 360 before it went, and that was also the end of the era of Epic Games making these titles. You know, the makers of Unreal and so forth. And after this series, Microsoft owned the rights to Gears of War the entire time. Like they owned the rights from the very beginning, even though there was hints of it trying to be made for other systems. Like they found a PS3 build of it for one of them that was being done. But it kind of cemented it as an Xbox thing. You would play this on a 360. That's part of why you'd want to get one and kind of go from there. One last thing I wanted to touch on, though, before we go to the next trilogy real quick to talk about those, is the sound.
Only on Xbox 360.
Yep. The
Only on
sound
Xbox.
effects. That was the funny one because it's on PC as well. The sound effects and the sound design in this game is so underrated.
Oh, yeah.
Every little noise we'd hear, like when you'd pick up a cog tag or you'd hear a detail or finish a mission, the gun animations, like hearing the reloads, like all those had to feel visceral. Of course, I know all the stuff with the sniper rifle because that was the one I used, but you'd hit a headshot and you hear that, you know, the way the head
that was the most
exploded.
satisfying sound.
Yeah, the jibs.
I guarantee if you walk into a group of older gamers and you just play that sound, most of them are going to be like, oh, headshot. We know what's going on.
And then there was that.
I also think, and then like Dead Space kind of borrowed from it a little bit too, was ever since the days of like Doom or Quake, we were just used to either you fall down or you explode into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And Gears introduced like, no, we're gonna cut like a slice off of you. So they would actually go diagonal from like neck to waist, and you'd be like, oh, this is brand new. Like I'm not looking at just explosions. Like I'm looking at like sliced chunks, and it was like a new feeling that we didn't get again until Dead Space, where you could cut horizontal and stuff. But
and if you pinned him with a grenade, which that got added in, I think on the second one, and things like that, you would get the chunks of them as they blew up. But I think the biggest jump in Visceral is when you could start going behind them and just shove the chainsaw on their back, and they're just like,
the chainsaw lobotomy.
Yeah.
And then they gave you the executions for each weapon to take it to 11.
Oh, yeah.
I still have the sniper rifle golf club. You just hold it down. 4.
It's chainsaw lobotomy was 2 as well, I think. 2 was pinning grenades and the chainsaw lobotomy. That was...
Well, 3, they introduced the Retro Lancer, which that had where you could run up and just nail somebody. And that really tied in with the visceralness of it as well, because force feedback was really well done on these games. So you'd feel the
Mhm.
rumble with a lot of the stuff, like revving the chainsaw, and you would hear it even if you let go of it and it wasn't running. It didn't just stop. You'd hear the engine kind of wind down like you're shutting off a lawnmower,
Yep.
seeing the smoke come out
Yeah,
of it.
speaking of speaking of sound design, you could also tell when you'd have to reload your checkpoint because you'd hear that familiar sound of the torque bow hitting you, and you're like, "I'm stuck."
Yeah, and you could identify a lot of creatures or weapons by their sound
Yeah,
because you would
they
hear the
are
torque
very
boat pull
varied, so
back.
you could tell by just the gun itself, like the
Hmm.
sound effects, which gun they were using. Because even when playing through the campaign, you're like, "I'm taking him out. I want his gun,"
Yeah.
because you'd hear what he's been using.
Yeah.
And while you'd have the ones who were obvious, like the boomers, um,
Well,
and the diggers and
the boomers
such,
are the
but
ones where you wouldn't see them. You would be there and be like, "What's going on?" And all of a sudden, you hear that in the distance. You're like, "Scatter!" Because there's explosives coming because they would
Oh yeah.
delay the shot.
yeah, it was kind of like you were playing bomb golf with them, and they'd be yelling four. They're just like, "I'm about to explode you," and you're like, "No, God, no, not again."
Well, you would be fighting and fighting and fighting until you finally heard the ejective complete sound, which is that. And you're just like, "Oh my god, it's finally over! Like I can breathe for a second. Like we're in between fights." But yeah, the tickers, the sound effect for those was terrifying.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that clicking sound, I hated it because they'd
Yeah, I just
scream
hated
and
when I
click
was
and
like in
run.
a firefight and I would just hear the chink, 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 chink. And I'm like, oh man, can we reload? Because
We're about to reload.
my body's about to empty its clip.
Yeah, they paid so much attention to the animations too. Like you'd just be walking around, your head would just explode. You just drop as the screen turned red. And you're just like, "Well, I'm dead. They sniped me." Oh, I think it was Gears 2. They added in the chainsaw duels.
Yep.
That got crazy because you're sitting there tapping B, trying to keep them from killing you. Sparks flying everywhere. It's just this was, I feel like, the high point in design for the Gears series.
Gears, I think if you asked a lot of people, they'd probably say Gears 2 was like the best of the original trilogy.
It was their
I think,
empire.
yeah,
It was their
That's
it was.
Terminator.
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember in Gears 2, the when you first get introduced back to the sniper rifle again, and there's like, you see kind of like what you talked about with the groupings,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd see like those like 20 or so locusts just like running like this chasm like far away, and I remember like, oh, you could shoot them. It's like a little mini game because as you would shoot them, then Marcus would be like, "That's one, that's two, that's three," and then like he would just get more excited as you like kept getting them. It was so fun.
Yeah, I think we worked together on that because it was an achievement or something. Like, tell you to
Yeah.
unlock something by getting those for the secret little text. It was great. All right, so we are going to jump now into the second trilogy. So we have Gears of War 4 and Gears of War 5, along with their Hive Busters, and Gears of War Tactics, which this is Gears of War 4 was released in 2016. This was around on the original Xbox One. Gears 5 was 2019 for Xbox One, but had a massive update for Series X, which added a lot of stuff to it. And then Tactics, we'll talk about a little bit. That was a Series X and S launch title in 2020, which was an actual tactical game that took place earlier on. But this was the era where Epic had left, and now we had a company that Microsoft had formed called the Coalition, which I did like their logo being the little chainsaw blades. That was kind of a nice touch. But this was made up of a lot of guys that came over from Epic or from other companies that used to work on the Gears of War series to kind of carry it on. And we get probably the biggest time jump I've seen yet, at least moving forward. We're going to get a larger time jump going backwards with the E-Day game that's coming out, because that one's 14
In a good
years.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Gears 4 and 5, after the war, or next generation as we call it, this is where you introduce to JD Vance, which is this lovely fellow here. I'm so happy to find this figure. I know Gears of War 4 and Gears of War 5, for some people, are very much against it. Um, I liked them. I thought they were fun. I treated them as they were, but I could see the flaws. They tried different ideas that didn't always click. You gotta admit these games were fucking gorgeous though.
Absolutely
4 and
gorgeous.
5 look phenomenal. Um, but you've got JD trying to raid because now you don't really have the locusts anymore because we didn't talk about it before, but I guess in the end of 3 they'd kind of introduced a way, almost a virus type thing that kind of crystallized a lot of the locust and the lambent and everything, and it was like that pulse wave I think from his dad,
Yeah, the
if I remember correctly.
Marcus's dad, Adam, turned out he
Yeah.
wasn't dead, which was the whole reason why Marcus got imprisoned in the first place. Because he disobeyed orders, tried to save his dad, thought his dad had died. Turned out he was alive. He created a weapon that would get rid of the emulsion, that would
Mm-hmm.
destroy the emulsion, but the problem was the weapon hadn't been perfected yet, so it would kill both destroy the emulsion and kill the locust.
Mm-hmm.
So you activated it, which then kind of ended the war, at least so you thought. And then in 4, you slowly get reintroduced to the locust with like the crystals and the but then they changed the name of them. They call them the swarm now. And just anybody that plays the original trilogy is just like, fuck off, it's still the locust.
I get the idea of why they changed that, because it's supposed to be like a different tribe of them or something, like that's why they
Yeah,
referred to it. But
it's like the next
yeah,
generation of locust.
it's just locusts.
Yeah.
um, they're a little bit different because this one introduced the idea of, you know, what was it 4 that introduced the idea that man kind of made locusts, like they were it goes back and forth, like if they were made by people with experimentation or if they were already there. Like it got weird for a while.
Gears 2 dabbled in it because you had
Mm-hmm,
that one level where you're in the lab, but they
mm-hmm.
never really like followed it. They just kind of put it there, and then I think Coalition actually said, "Oh, let's take that level and let's really run with this." Like
Well, you find
idea.
another lab because you have the AI that you deal with in this one as well.
Yep.
Um, but this one introduced the robots as a big enemy, um, which that I think is what a lot of people didn't like, because it was such a different type of enemy and different type of combat. Um, you're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. 4, go ahead.
Well, with the robots, because there was a lot of like stealth segments with the robots, both like the regular ones and the corrupted ones, because you could like
Yeah.
grab the power core and yank it out the back. So that was something they tried new. This is also where they tried the thing that you didn't like with the cover system, where now people could run up to your cover, jump over it, and kick you, and then do like this automatic execution move, which looked cool if you were doing it, but it really sucked
Yeah.
if they did it.
The automatic execution where it kind of sucked, but I did understand the idea behind it coming at you. But we had a whole new generation of people that were located for this. And you have JD, and I'm trying to remember what his other friends were.
Dell.
Lincoln. Yeah, the computer, Dell computer.
Yeah,
Um,
the explanation is that the locusts were hit by the emotion countermeasure. They did not die. Instead, they mutated into the swarm,
Yes.
yep.
which is why everybody was like, "Fuck you, they're locusts." You're half right, sir.
There are a
The
new generation of them.
Yeah, JD was Marcus's son, JD Phoenix, or
Mm-hmm.
James Dominic Phoenix, as his full name was. And then you had Dell. I don't remember his last name. And then you had Kate,
Mm-hmm.
who ends up being a pretty pivotal character in the series, because you find out later that she is related to Queen Mira of the
Yep.
Locust that you meet in. You see, I think she makes I think at Gears of War Ultimate Edition, she makes like a cameo at the very end, but you actually first fully saw her in 2,
Yep.
and then 3, you obviously kill her. because she's riding that giant fucking flying beetle that was so annoying to fight.
That whole fight on the roof, we're just like, God, just die.
And
Oh,
yeah, and so then it turns out that Kate is related to her, so
yeah, because
she ends
that
up
was
becoming
part of the
pivotal.
experimentation. Because Queen Mira was the result of the experimentation and was
Yeah,
found to be able to control the locusts and kind of communicate with them. So that's where you had the murkiness of like where, who made who or who experimented on them. But in 4, you start getting where people were captured and being cocooned to change.
yeah,
And that's what led to some of the newer forms of the different enemies and kind of seeing that people and locusts were connected. Like it was so,
Hive mind.
yeah, the hive
yeah,
mind thing. It got very confusing.
yeah. Because instead of wretches, you had juvies,
Mm-hmm.
which were basically just like it's the same. It was the same thing, same concept. They were, but it was just a different look because they obviously were like people that were in the cocoons, but not for like as long, and so they weren't quite mature yet. So they were like running on all fours and climbing up things, and um, you could tell like the similarities.
Yeah,
And
from
then you don't actually get exposed to the drones for quite a while in 4.
yeah, because you don't know what they are. You're going through like the old towns and so forth, fighting a bunch of the juvies. Those things were coming up from everywhere, and they had the snatchers. The ill-named thing that Steven did not like the title for. You didn't like Snatcher, Steven?
Well, incubators.
The incubators,
That's what the pods were, is incubators.
right?
And then you get
That's why I shoot every single one of them. I was just like, screw these snatchers.
oh yeah, and then and
We
then
blew up so many of those things. I'm surprised it wasn't an achievement.
yeah, it should have been. It was so funny because like we would just like hearing Marcus yell at us, so we'd pop every pod we could and be like, "Stop popping the pods!"
I think what was kind of a weakness for this game though is because of the announcement of all the characters they had,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't feel, I guess, or you didn't have enough backstory for when a character even passed. So you didn't like feel the way you did in Gears 2 when
Yeah,
person's like, I'm gonna go, and you're like, all right, see you later, I guess. And they're like, no, I'm gonna kill myself, and you're just like, all right, go fight. And I felt that it just became Kates of Gear towards the end, where you're just like, what are we fighting for now? Are we
Right.
fighting for her mission? Are we just trying to finish her story, and instead of like what the overlying story was? So it was losing its way for me when I was playing 4.
well, Gears of War 4 was kind of this weird thing where the introduction of it was kind of weird in the sense that you are actually trying to rob a cog settlement, and
Yes.
you're just like, and we're just kind of like, wait a minute. Like it's just, and it's not necessarily that it's because you really like the cog, because even like
Yeah,
Marcus and them,
it became like a Marvel Civil War type thing where you had the Cog were authoritarians,
yeah,
and they were all like prime and proper, while Marcus was old school and he's like, we didn't do that back then and stuff. You
yeah,
know,
but it was just yeah, and they explain that later on as you go. But yeah, you had the cog, you had the outsiders, and you were Marcus's son, but you were an outsider and you were robbing a cog settlement. And it just feels like this feels off in its own way. And then
Yeah, the coalition, the game is fun. All right. So
yeah,
Gears of War 4 I did enjoy, but it feels like they kind of stumbled out of the gate trying to figure out what they wanted to do with the story and this world, which they kind of got a little bit better in line or not with 5, depending on how you look at it. JD is definitely not part of the inline part for that story. Um, but they were pushing more of like environmental dangers and stuff like that as well, because you had the
oh
windstorms,
my god,
which were great looking, but how many times did we die trying to walk through those? You just zap. Oh
and the
crap.
wind flares. It was like
Yeah.
oh, and it was like it wasn't that it was a bad segment, because you were right. It was absolutely beautiful. Like, this game was absolutely
It was
stunning.
brutal.
It's one of
Yeah,
those games. Gears of War
I think
4,
that
you could have
instead
said it.
of
Go ahead.
I think instead of emotional pieces, like you said, I think they focus more on set pieces. Like they
Yeah.
wanted to show how grand things have progressed in graphics too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Gears 4 was that game that you like put on to like show your friends how pretty your Xbox and TV combination could look. It was absolutely phenomenal looking. But the wind flares thing, you'd like you get in a fight, you'd like get through that and you'd be like, all right, sweet. And then all of a sudden a wind flare would show up. You're like, oh man, okay. So then you'd like be moving through and avoiding the lightning and all that stuff. And then you're like, sweet, that's awesome. And then you'd get in another fight, and all of a sudden you're like halfway through that fight, and another wind flare would show up. And you're like, wait a minute, what the hell? I just and it just got to the point where then like every 10 feet you'd walk, there's another wind flare. It was
Like,
like stop.
I liked the part where you're going through the wind flare while you're going through like the farmhouse and stuff, and you're like getting into
Yeah.
little fights and things are breaking apart, because it felt like
Yeah, because then like the
one
roof was like
continuous
getting torn
struggle.
off.
Yeah, it's one continuous struggle to try and survive it. And I've lived through really bad hurricanes. I know how that is. So
Yeah.
I kind of was thinking of that during it. But they messed with how some of the weapons worked, what ammo you would get with crates, which made the sniper rifles harder to use because you couldn't always get ammo for it, for a lot of those, which they changed and fixed in the next one, I believe, in 5.
Yeah.
So I could at least get some of my ammo back again. But
That was one thing that we
wanted
didn't
my
really
sniper
touch
rifle,
on.
damn it.
Yeah,
Go
that
ahead.
was one thing we didn't really touch on with the original trilogy, is how to kind of go along with the hopelessness, like ammo management was crucial, because like especially in co-op, if I pick up this box of ammo, that means you don't get that ammo.
Yep.
So it was one of these things where we'd have to constantly communicate. Like you'd have to, say like, "Oh, this is how much ammo I've got. How much ammo do you got?" And then we'd have to really manage our ammo, because yeah, that game was brutal with ammo management.
Or you say dibs and then you report your friend.
Oh, but
Well, they
yeah, there
also
was
pushed that you have to swap weapons all the time too, because you didn't
yeah,
always have the ammo for it. And this one did that a little bit more, but I wasn't as big into the selection of the weapons they had, especially specifically the robot ones. The cog robot
yeah.
did not like their guns that much at all.
The only one that was even really worth it to me was the M-bar sniper rifle, but I would still
Mhm.
prefer the long shot to that one. Like if I had the choice, like so
Yeah.
yeah. But kind of also with the wind flare thing, I think what was really annoying is they've made it a point to have it in like every single chapter that you played. It was like, and sometimes you'd be walking through a factory and then all of a sudden you'd go outside just to have like a wind flare show up, and then you'd like weasel your way around to go back inside. I was just like, wait a minute, like did you really just take us through that just so that way you could have a wind flare? Like,
You
come on.
spent a lot of time programming the wind flare. You're going to see a bunch.
Yeah,
I always
exactly.
laugh. It's like you're in these old decrepit buildings. The wind flare would come through and break it. It's like, how many times has this already happened? Why is it now that it's finally breaking at this point? Like it should be holding up okay.
It'll
Yeah.
hold. It's made of wood. It'll hold.
God. Yeah. One of the other mechanics they added for this one was, I would kind of call it base building, where you'd have the fabricator. So we had
Yeah.
to kind of set up a point, use the fabricator to build up and, rebar and gun emplacements and stuff like that. And you have to hold against waves of enemies coming at you, basically horde mode, but in story mode. I was hit or miss on those. They could be fun or they could be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, that was a Judgment rip, because Judgment introduced that kind of, well, I mean, technically I guess you could argue 2 did, because 2 had horde mode.
Horde mode's
And
the best.
then yeah, which was really good. And then but then in 2 they actually had like where you could walk around and there'd be like turrets and things laying down, so that way you could set it up, because Baird would be like, we defended this position with like tooth and nail with only like pistols and boom shields, and like, oh god. But then
Don't remind me.
Just once to be like, yeah, everybody was well armed except Steven. Steven had nothing. And he'd be like, wait a minute, hold on.
Oh yeah, we walked into the great, the Pendulum Wars with a jug of milk and a pencil. It's like, shut up! No, I want my sniper rifles.
And so then four took it to like another level because you'd have that fabricator, you'd like build your defenses and stuff, and it was just like, okay, like
We had a couple. Well, there was the one at the encampment. You had to do that one, which was after you got the first when you got the first fabricator. Then there's
yep.
the one later on when we're down in the mines, going down everything. That had
That
the
one was
fabricator
brutal.
because that one was like 3 or 4 phases. Like it was, God, we died so many times. So
The enemies in 4 were extremely brutal with executions. Like if you got downed, if somebody didn't get you up in like a couple seconds, there was somebody there to rip your head off, rip your arm off, and beat you with it, like anything. It was horrible.
Kind of sounds like
so
they needed a
violent.
third player in that game.
That'd have been
Yeah.
nice.
Would have been really nice.
Yeah, that was they returned back to 2-player co-op, which was kind of weird for some of those, I think.
Don't get me started on that Brewmax segment.
Oh yeah, so many. Just the things standing there in the middle of the room, and we're just trying to survive going around. How many times did we die and do that again? It had to
Over
be like
30.
30, 50 times. It felt like.
Remind me, Chase, though, was this the first game that had a post-credit scene?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I didn't know if we saw anything else with the earlier ones.
Well, Gears 4, the post-credit scene, you find out Oscar's still alive.
Yep.
He came out of the snatcher.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah, because he
He just sliced his way out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've got the robot cog. Those get infected with some of the stuff, which starts, corrupting them. So you have to fight those. You find out about the swarm, where they came from during exploration, going down into the mine and everything. You deal with the AI that's there, which comes back later, I believe, because you deal with different versions of him. I thought the voice acting for that guy was pretty well done.
It was really well done.
So, but that leads off. You find out with Kate, like I said, she's the queen's daughter in that regard. So she finds she has a connection with the other characters. And this leads towards the end of it where they kind of separate off. So JD and Kate go different ways. And, it's not the best ending on
We
there.
get the Rise of Skywalker ending.
Yeah, because in the beginning of 5, they had that whole thing where Kate's having like all the headaches and all that stuff. And then
well, she starts taking over some of the swarm when they're showing up.
What was it? The encampment. So yeah, it was the cog settlement gets attacked, and then you're still playing as JD at this point. But then at the end of that game, there's a character named Foz,
the British one.
Australian.
And my bad.
It's Foz, right? Yeah, yes, sir. Shut the fuck up, Foz. Yep, sir.
Yep.
And so Foz and JD have like this rivalry thing because like nobody really likes Foz because Foz is like this prim and proper, like, oh, everything's got to be like, through like the proper channels and all this stuff, and he's like he's like the soldier that wants everything to be done by the books, and JD's more like off the cuff and everything, but he does a lot of things that he's probably not supposed to, and people, and Foz thinks that he gets away with it because he's the golden child, because he's Marcus's son. Because in 5, you're back with the cog again, and then at the end of the second one, a lot of people don't like Foz because they thought that he ordered those cog robots, to fire on civilians. Foz finally has enough of it, says, and then finally just says, like, no, actually, it wasn't me. You want to know who it was? Look at Golden Boy over here. He's the one that gave the order. Throws JD completely under the bus, and then backs it up. And so then all of a sudden, Kate and Dell just automatically hate JD. And they want to talk to him. Like, nothing.
I'm taking over as the main character. Get out.
Yeah.
Total character assassination.
We're gonna drop of war. We're gonna call it Gears of Kate.
Well, we forgot to mention.
I'm sorry, just Gears.
With the headaches thing, which we knew it wasn't. I was wrong earlier. It's not. She wasn't the queen's daughter. She was the queen's granddaughter. Her mom was the queen's daughter,
Yep.
the one that was experimented on. Because when she gets captured, she gets stuck into the hive mind and kind of becomes the new queen until you have to try and kill her, but it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, so she is the queen's daughter, technically.
Yeah.
Like, you're not wrong.
Okay.
Because
Second
Rhaena,
queen, whatever.
Yeah, because Rhaena becomes the queen.
Mm-hmm.
In the fifth one. You think you kill her, but you don't. And then Rhaena becomes queen. But yeah, you because then you go to the cogs, start sending people to like outcast settlements to try to get them to come in to the fold, because the problem is the outcasts are the ones that are getting snatched up by the snatchers, and and then you know, and then that's what's getting that's what's getting turned into the locusts. So but then yeah, so you're playing as Kate and Dell, and then the settlement gets attacked, and at one point Kate gets, you know, gathered up by a snatcher, and then she starts controlling some of the locusts, and it led to like a pretty it probably led to one of the funnier like gameplay segments ever, because
I was playing as Kate, so I kept becoming the different locusts, and I'd be like, "It's me! Don't shoot!" And one would be like, "I got him!" My head would explode. I'm like, "Damn it, that was me!"
So Jeremy was
It wouldn't
controlling a
tell you.
locust, and then Swan, with probably one of the best, probably like the best thing that we could say about Gears 5 is that it went to 3-player. The third player gets to play as Jack, so Swan's just flying around zapping everything. Jeremy's like, what's shocking me? I don't understand.
The second best thing, because the best thing about Gears 5 is that Chase finally got to experience Dave Bautista as Marcus Phoenix. That the fact that he did his Batista bomb as the execution animation for the Nasher, and if you played a versus match as him, you got his WWE entrance music. So what else could you ask for, except for they added Terminators in the game and the New Day as Cog.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But yeah, I kept becoming different creatures and dying the most hilarious deaths that whole time. It took us forever to figure that out.
I learned in 5, like, if I act really stupid, like, maybe they won't shoot me.
Well, you were just looking for chippies. Just wanting your chippies.
Yeah, well, then eventually Jack gets the ability to hijack locusts. So, like, Swan would be like, I'm about to take this guy over. Don't shoot him. Like, oh, okay.
But and when I'm done with them, they just explode. So I was like, this is great.
Yeah, we leveled up to that point.
Yeah.
So, you know, but we go through the whole mission to get the Hammer of Dawn, which I don't believe we didn't even mention the Hammer of Dawn this whole time. Good God, what's wrong with us?
Oh, yeah.
That's basically the satellite-based
weapon. It was the only way you could take down the scary berserker in the beginning.
Yeah. Basically, it's a satellite that if it was over your position, you could target a point, and it would just shoot this laser down from space and hit that point and just tear through things. So it was very powerful, but very limited in when you could use it. So that was kind of their means of balancing it out. But they get it going again somewhat in the beginning for 5, and JD tries to use it because everybody's hating on him now. So he's desperately trying to get everyone's attention back and try and be the hero and save this stuff. Try and be a Marcus Phoenix, basically. And it goes wrong. The target doesn't stay where it is and ends up killing a group of people and blowing up, and he gets all injured too.
Kills the 5th Carmine. Lizzie
Yep,
Carmine.
finally killed him. He went down. Or she went down, sorry. That was a she this time.
Yeah, I think that was Clayton's
daughter,
niece?
I think.
Niece.
Okay. There's so many Carmines. They have to keep reproducing because they just keep killing them off. It's like that's the only way to survive. But JD doesn't show up until later where he's got like this weird translucent hexagon pattern on his arm, like where it's all burned from the Hammer of Dawn explosion. And him and Foz have become like all buddy buddy in there. And he's trying to get back on into Kate's good graces, trying to get anybody's good graces, but he's still kind of a dick about it. I think one of you guys called it like character assassination, basically, like just gonna make everybody hate JD now. I mean, he had such the pretty face, and they just destroyed it. They shaved him and gave him a weird beard.
I think it's because they. This is just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an agenda on the game, but my opinion of the game was Kate got so bossy that it was just her way or the game stops.
Mm-hmm.
That they were like, "We need you to feel for her, so let's just make JD not likable anymore." Or
Well,
try.
they wanted to push her character. I understand that, like because of how important her character is to the series now, being the Queen Mira's granddaughter, Queen Rhaena's daughter. And then that's when you go through because after the section we talked about where Jeremy is controlling all the locusts, he ends up taking control of one of the locusts that goes into a set piece where he has to kill Uncle Oscar, and the and so the thing is that she kind of withholds this secret, but obviously like Marcus knows that something's fucked up with her, and he says, I think I know a place where you might be able to find some answers you're looking for, which then harkens back to the lab in Gears 2 with AI, and you start to find out more and more and more. You start to delve more into her story, but at the end of that segment where after Marcus says, go to this lab here, blah blah blah, JD shows up with Foz and is a captain now, and then just all of a sudden is like, no, you are going to, that's an order, you need to go back to base, blah blah, blah, all stuff. It completely talks to her in a way that he would never have talked to her before. And then she's like, well, screw your orders, Captain. This isn't about you. This is about me. And like all this other stuff. It's just like, wait a minute. What? Like,
It got a little weird. They managed to kind of straighten it out later in the game, but once that ended, we don't have another Gears of War after this. The Gears of War we've got announced so far, being E-Day, is way back decades prior at the very beginning, but even before the first Gears of War. So I'm hoping they don't just leave that ending sitting there. Like eventually they'll do something with it, and E-Day might be like they're learning how to do stuff on the Series X, and this will be the second game for 6.
I do like that they're kind of bringing back the hopelessness or the fear because they want. Yeah. This is before they knew if anything worked on the locust or what worked. So one locust is supposed to be super scary.
Mm-hmm. And that trailer showed it for E-Day. Good Lord.
Because the trailer for E-Day just made it like you're going to lose hope fighting one, let alone like a swarm of them. Because like you don't know what kills them yet. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because E-Day. So I think a couple things, because like Coalition said, oh, we couldn't really pass up this opportunity to do E-Day and stuff, and I think it's like, well, I think part of the reason why they're doing E-Day is because 5 had some mixed feelings, had some mixed with like fans and stuff, some mixed emotions with fans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think E-Day is their way of trying to bring some of these like hardcore fans back to the fold. And but yeah, E-Day is going to be exciting because we're obviously exploring the day, which is going to be like, in and of itself quite interesting, because other than a few flashback segments, we've never, nothing's really touched on that particular day. And then we're going to learn how the Lancer was made, which is the Lancer Mark II, which is the one we all know and love. And yeah, Swan's absolutely right. Like having the Locust be this ominous presence.
Because, like even Chase pointed on before, is the ammo conservation once they became authoritarian, it was like, oh, we got it laying around everywhere. So there was never like a shortage of ammo.
Yeah, just for
Um,
particular types of guns, you'd always have
and,
something, whether you
and
liked it or
and
not.
they would have set pieces where there's guns lining the walls, rooms you would suddenly get to with more guns. So it became less of like, this is hopeless, and more of like, um, let's finish Kate's story. Like, I was like, okay.
And I don't mind finishing Kate's story. I want to see where that goes, but I think they're still trying to feel their way through it, and they kind of made a misstep with JD on how they handled that. They've got the characters back, and one of the
Sort of.
things in five, yeah, one of the things in five, and we went back and did this twice because I wanted to see how this went. Is you have to make a decision as Kate on who to save because her mom, the queen, is choking out a couple of the characters, and you can only save one of them. You throw the knife to cut the tentacle, and then the other one dies between JD and Dell. And I think the first time I did it, I saved Dell and killed JD.
You did.
I did because you guys didn't tell me anything. You said you didn't want to tell me anything. So I was like, I'm just going to see what happens. So I
And
saved
we both
Dell.
internally screamed at that moment.
I just wanted to see what happened.
No, but in all honesty, and sorry people who like Dell, but
Mm-hmm.
one choice had huge gravitas behind it, and the other one was like, oh, all right.
Yeah, I mean, you save Dell, and then you have to go talk to Marcus, and his tell him JD is dead, and all the stuff that's going on.
Because that when Chase and I first experienced that for me was more of an homage back to 2 and 3, where he's just like, everybody who I thought was like invincible and just could get through anything didn't.
Well,
And
he had a life of
that
everybody
just
dying
hit
around him.
Marcus. That made like telling Marcus or Batista that like hit so much harder, because you're just like, they dealt with that loss, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just like, man, like, does Marcus have a breaking point? Like, you kind of thought that, but when it was Dell, he was just like, oh,
Yeah, it felt.
just another gear in the cog. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, because we did go back and do it again where I saved JD instead, and yeah, the Dell ending was not the
They were
best.
just they just looked the other way, and they're like, "Yay, JD!" So
Yeah, it was.
It was it did his character dirty, man.
then you wonder to yourself, like, if they ever made a Gear 6, which one are they going to follow? Because when you have a choice of killing off a character, you're then going to wonder which way are they going to follow. They might surprise us. They might do a poll like they did with Carmine, or a poll like they did with Robin, like live or die.
I mean,
That segment was so weird because like what we just talked about earlier with like the original trilogy, they didn't shy away from killing people. Killing people up. So why all of a sudden give us the choice? Just if you want a certain character to die, just kill them in a gruesome and visceral way,
well,
or however you
I
want to do
wonder
it.
if they were planning like for Gear 6 to have the two storylines where like if you're game save from 5, if you killed JD, this is where you'd go. If you
Yeah.
killed Dell, this is where you went, which is adding a lot of extra development because once you start doing stuff like that, things get crazy. Ask the guys from Mass Effect. They can tell you
Yeah.
we went a little far.
Um,
Go ahead.
and I thought I thought the whole thing where they made the decision, gave you this decision, I thought was kind of weird. But then so if you save Dell and you kill JD, it almost felt like they just told Dell's voice actor, like, hey, just so you know, like, nobody's going to choose to save you. So just kind of phone us in a couple lines, read from the script, and we'll be good. And other than Marcus's character having like some gravitas to it, as Swan pointed out, kind of felt a little lackluster. But then when you if you kill Dell and you save JD, like JD's character's like into it, man. And then like, you know, and then like Marcus is there to try to console him because like, it's essentially like JD losing his dom kind of moment, right? And that's what
Right.
Marcus is kind of like, he's like, I know what you're going through because I went through this. And then Foz shows up and he's like, anybody want a ride? Anybody call for a ride? And then like he doesn't see Dell there, and he's just like, oh fuck. And he's just their voice acting was like way more into it. I'm just like, oh man, like I felt like they did this guy a little dirty.
Yeah, Foz's reactions were a little confusing sometimes with that one. I mean, I appreciated the idea behind it, where you could make that choice, and it was very interesting. But this kind of feels like that should have been something to end a trilogy, not middle of it.
Yeah.
Because that's going to make the next one confusing. Which,
Oh no, we ended the trilogy on the most patriotic death of all time.
Oh, Jack. Yeah.
good old self-sacrificing Jack.
Jack
Yeah,
in the Box.
yeah. Six. I don't know when they're going to ever announce that. Hopefully, they will continue it. I don't want them to just be like get to 5, go back to the beginning, and just kind of start again. Or
I think E-Day will be very important because that game needs to do very well to show
Yes.
people still care about Gears, especially since it's the Gears game people wanted them to make.
well, Gear 6 could be a PS6 launch title.
That's true. It's going to be on
The
the Switch
marketing is
Online.
right there. I mean,
It's going to be on the Switch Online Game Pass, so we're good.
oh man.
Well,
So-
I mean, they're
ahead.
going to have to do a 6 because they kind of ended it on this cliffhanger. So I can't imagine them not doing a 6, but I think, yeah, they're trying to get some people back into the fold with E-Day, which I'm excited about because I've always said that, because throughout Gears, we kind of didn't touch on this, but throughout Gears, you can get these collectibles, right? And especially in 2 and 3, you got a lot of collectibles that explain backstory.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to now go back and actually we get to play through that backstory, such an awesome, it's going to be, like I'm excited for it because I think it's something I've said that they should do. And I mean, but I've taken it a step further and I said I'd love to see a Pendulum Wars game because I think it'd be really good.
I think Pendulum Wars would be a good multiplayer expansion. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
just kind of like a little bit of story with some multiplayer, and it fits the war setting for that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a Tactics 2, though.
I
Yeah.
could see that. And we'll touch on that real quick. I know, Chase, you played more of Tactics than I did, so I'll let you talk a little bit about that one, and we'll kind of wrap up our thoughts on this little second trilogy-ish right now.
The important things about Tactics is to note is that as the name suggests, as a tactics game, it's basically like Gears of War meets XCOM, which made me extremely excited because I love those types of games. I thought the mechanics that they did were really well done, like including executions, the chainsaws, the bayonet charges, how they made a lot of those, incorporated all those things into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And as far as the story's concerned, story doesn't really do anything groundbreaking. It pushes a little bit more into that, who created the Locust, how did the Locust come to exist thing.
Right.
But then the main character, his name is Gabe. I can't remember his surname at the moment, but the main character Gabe is you'll find out later because is Kate's dad. So they kind of made him important that way.
Gabe
And
Diaz.
then Gabe Diaz, yeah, and it's Kate Diaz. So yeah, Gabe is Kate's dad, and then you meet Kate's mother in the story. He finds her as a Locust prisoner and stuff. So but the game itself is actually really good. If you like tactics games, it's really well done. Awesome game. Highly recommend it for people. It's Gears of War. Like, it's got brutal executions. It's got the visceral that you expect from that game. And I definitely recommend it.
Okay. All right. So we'll wrap up our thoughts on this second trilogy and kind of just how we feel about how this one's going or where it could go. But Steven, we'll start with you on that one.
I think it's gotten to the point now where it's one of those series that has very strong mythos, strong lore, and the fact that I was just now looking up that before you play E-Day, you should probably like read the novels, because the novels kind of fill in the blanks too. One of them even talks about Dom's brother Carlos, who they only very rarely touch on for E-Day. So I think that's what what got me playing through the games, whether they were super strong like 2 and 3,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of meandered like 4 or 5 for me. But I think like as a whole, like I'll still like it for its strengths, especially where when we got to 4 or 5, they decided to go more grandeur with their effects to show you what they were dealing with. Wasn't fan of the mech part at the end of 4, but uh,
Love that. But yeah, I
but
get you.
but other than that, like I get what they were doing with it. This is one of those series where even when the coalition was formed, it did have some prodigies from the Gears of War franchise working on them, and they took what they knew in there, and you can tell like the series has been made with love ever since, with or without its creator. It's kind of like God of War, where it's been standing the test of time. So while you might not be a fan of how the story changes or evolves, it's being made for literally the next generation.
Yeah.
So um, so there's no games like it. There, back when Gears 1 and 2 were in their heyday, I could say that I own and I've played a lot of the knockoffs that they tried to make. Looking at you, Quantum Theory, um, where I'm just like, okay, you can't just put me in a sci-fi element or a monster-filled world and give me a cover mechanic and a fat guy. I was like, I need to know that it's armor, and I think this series had its longevity because it started on a very dark note. It wasn't the trope that everybody hates, that we talked about last, saying like you're the only savior, and you know you're gonna solve everything, because as we found out in the first few Gears, like there were other people trying, but when they got captured, they got taken to the breaking point. So it was a fresh take on everything, and I'm just sad that the last game that Cliffy B made was Lawbreakers, because I didn't like that game.
Man. All right, Chase, what about you? Your thoughts on the 4 or 5 and I guess tactics as well?
Um, Tactics I love just because it's strategy,
Mm,
and I'm always gonna like be a big fan of that. 4, really enjoyed 4. I mean, if you had to ask me, I enjoyed 5 as well, but if you had to ask me, like as a whole, like what was probably the weaker entry of the series, I'd probably say it was 5.
okay.
Um, and um, it's not because like Kate's the main character or like anything like that. It's more the fact that they tried some new stuff, which I appreciate, but it just didn't hit like the way I think they were hoping. And they tried this really weird bit of writing to character assassinate JD's character, which I thought was odd because they're like, we're just gonna have JD do something that his character would totally never do. When you think about it, and but overall, absolutely love this series. And it's one of those series that I can play, you know, over and over and over and over again. Like I'll just pick it up randomly and just start playing the series again, just because it's such a fun franchise to play. and and the best part of it is that you get to experience it with your friends. You know, the co-op is, I mean, it's a little weird that they went from, like it was great when they went from 2 to 3 or 2 to 4. Then they went back to 2, which I thought was weird, but then they upped it back to 3, so that was good. um but yeah, overall, the sequel series Coalition's doing great. I'm really looking forward to E-Day. I think that they're going to have I think they're going to do really good things with it. I'm going to stay optimistic. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to them hopefully continuing the mainline story as well.
All right. So, in regards to 4 and 5, like I did enjoy them mostly because of the hilarity of us playing together, going through these when we could. Um,
Damn it! Damn it! Damn it.
But I think story wise, they kind of lost track a little bit with 5. I was talking with Steven about this earlier. I think with JD, it feels almost like the way they treated him and the way he disappeared and came back feels like there should be a DLC that explains that time. Like, because he seemed to know part of what was going on with Kate. Like, he was kind of aware of it and keeping an eye on her and things. Like, maybe he could have been off exploring and researching some of this or going into other parts of it, him and Foz. And it's like maybe it didn't do well enough that we didn't get that content, or there were too much of a transition that they didn't do it. Go ahead, Steven.
So I sent Chase this, and the if you need something like that, somebody made a comprehensive list. It's 23 items, but between the games, the comics, the DLC, the books, he gives you a chronological order of taking it in, and there between 4 and 5 there is a book called Ascendance that's going to fill in some of the things you might want. And there's a book before Gears of War 4 called The Fear Rising that also will help you, because it's Gears of War 3, and then there's a book, Gears of War 4, then there's a book, Gears of War 5, then there's a book, Gears of War 5 Act 2. So I think they did a great job because they both had the backing of Coalition and Epic Games. So it's one of those things where it's one of those rare instances where a series is so popular that the questions we have been answered, but we have to look at other mediums, because there's actually a Gears of War omnibus, but it's like almost $200. It's rare now.
Holy crap.
Because it's all the comics collected.
Gotcha. All right. But going back to mine, Tactics, I have it, but I haven't played it much. I guess it didn't really click with me when I first got it at the launch of the Series X. I need to reinstall it and give it another go, because I have no problem playing tactical games like that with a controller. Halo Wars I was fine with, 1 and 2, things like that. So I think maybe it just didn't hit with me at the right time. But now that we've gotten back into Gears of War, because since we started doing the show again with Steven, and then Steven's like, hey, I have this friend named Chase that you might want to talk to about Gears of War. That's how we hit it off. And a huge chunk of our friendship, it's maybe online at the moment for this, and doing the show, has been our time playing through all of Gears of War, I think. And that is great. So I've had really good friends over the years that I've got to play these series, this, Halo, and, some other really good Xbox multiplayer titles that have kind of made those communities. And I hope to see that continue with E-Day. And eventually I would like to see 6 finish. I would like them to try and do what they could to fill out and finish out that story. Love it or hate it, I think it deserves at least to get an ending of some sort. And even if they aren't going to make a game about it, make it clear where you're going to have an ending or where we're going to continue. But I think that is a pretty good time to end some of this. There's been a 2-hour extra quarter going on here. Oh, someone's messaged me on Discord. Is that one of y'all?
It was me.
Ah,
What about it?
the omnibus. I'm ignoring that. Yeah, this is the second episode we've recorded tonight. It's 1:00 in the morning right now. So I know Steven and I are getting kind of tired. Chase is just like, yeah, it's the middle of Sunday. So, all right. Well, if you are watching the video version of this and you'd like to listen to it, we have an audio version you could look up anywhere you get your podcast for the Zenspath Entertainment Network podcast. Search for it, find us, you can subscribe, leave us a review. That always helps us out. Share it with your friends. If you're listening to this and you'd like to see the video version where we're waving toys around for part of this, you can go over to youtube.com/ZenspathCom. Leave us a thumbs up, share it with people. Leave us a comment about your favorite Gears of War, or, what you thought of the series and things like that. And we'll go from there. If you want to talk to us directly, you can find us over at Zenspath Podcast over on Twitter. You can find our individual information down below in the show notes or in the comments of the video. If you want to talk to us directly about this, go to bit.ly/Zenspath Discord. to join our Discord and talk to us there. All right. Well, this has been Jeremy, Steven, and Chase talking about Gears of War for Extra Quarter number 31. And we're out. Peace.
Wow, that was fun.